This is the thing about entrepreneurs. The world needs them. We need people with fire in their belly. So I am not trying to douse that flame.
No.
But your fire, your spirit is unique, awkward, and a little intimidating. Entrepreneurs with vision acknowledge everyone can't see that flame. Everyone can't appreciate its color. It's your job to put your flame in the context of the warmth that your audience is seeking.
Welcome, badass entrepreneurs. It's time to hear the world's movers, shakers, and difference makers spill their secrets for unlimited success. So strap in, for Badass Entrepreneurs Only begins now. Let me introduce to you Sasha Strauss. Today, Sasha is highly regarded as one of the most predominant voices of brand strategy in America and in many countries all over the world. In 2006, Sasha launched his company, Innovation Protocol, where he now leads a team of 30 brand consultants and designers who oversee a very impressive list of clients, including Google, PayPal, Disney, Lego, and Nestle. Sasha's expertise is sought out by media companies such as NPR, Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, and many, many others. He's also been a keynote speaker on the subject of branding for over 500 companies from 30 industries and in 20 countries. And when he's not doing all of that, Sasha also teaches graduate courses in brand strategy at Southern California universities, including UCLA Anderson, UC Irvine, and USC Marshall. He further teaches graduate programs in Switzerland and Korea. Sasha is absolutely passionate about giving back and is well known as a generous philanthropist, supporting the good works of over 50 nonprofit companies. In Sasha's TED Talk, called From Branding with Love, he tells us essentially that in business, we shouldn't try to just sell things to people. We should want them to feel passionate about what we're selling. We should want them to feel connected to us. We should want to sell things wrapped in love. That, as Sasha says, is what branding is. Now, to answer the question of how we do that is why Sasha Strauss is here today. We are so unbelievably fortunate to have him with us. So let's get badass. Sasha Strauss, welcome, welcome, welcome to For Badass Entrepreneurs Only.
Thank you so much, Dan. Appreciate it. And I just hope my mom gets access to this link because she needs to hear whatever you just said. That was, thank you.
I will send it to her personally. I keep coming back to your TED Talk. And that's because you did this amazing job of simplifying what branding is for people who don't understand, what branding is.
Yeah.
And you said this, and again, I'm paraphrasing. We want to sell things wrapped in love. That's what branding is. Right. So can we start there and talk about love? Like, why do we want to sell things wrapped in love?
Appreciate you listening to that talk and digging into it, because actually when I was preparing for that talk, I wanted to write something that would make people feel uncomfortable. And I think that when you talk about wrapping sales in love, like you're mirroring what I shared, there's a lot of people who are like, ooh, that sounds gross, or how could that possibly be possible? And that's exactly my intention. And just to get to the crux of your question, nobody likes to be sold to. And even if you want the thing that they're selling you, you worked hard to earn that car, you worked hard to earn that toothbrush, you still don't like the experience. It feels like you're being convinced. It feels like you're being manipulated. And that's my biggest issue, is that even, well, how's this? I need the toothbrush. I want the car. I worked hard to earn it. Can there be a transaction experience that doesn't feel like manipulation? And that was my intention behind that concept, which is there a way for me to relate to you and you to relate to me? And you say the same thing. You really do sort of say like, the selling experience is painful and annoying and distracting. They actually want to know who is selling to them. So make it about who they are and who you are. And that's the notion. That's the concept. That's what I mean by wrapping it in love, is that you're basically putting aside the features and functions, to use your words, putting aside the features and functions of the product and focusing on the people who are going to have to administer and participate in it. So long answer to your question about what it means to sort of wrap this.
And so when you're talking about love, how does love fit into brand strategy?
So brand strategy, it's really important to sort of separate it out from, let's say, branding, where a lot of times people say, "Oh, I put my logo on a pen." Is that branding? And I'm not demeaning that. I'm just saying what
But
I'm
you
talking
should.
about, what you're asking me about, is brand strategy. Now, brand strategy is a calculated, deductive, analytical process where what you come to, what you arrive at, is something that you intend to use for likely a decade or more. And that's the point in this question, is that if we want to think about brand strategy as a process of love creation, it's really about saying, all right, I'm going to be building this organization's identity. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm trying to be badass. I'm working hard to build something that lasts. I need my audience to care about me, like me, prefer me, refer to me, advocate for me. All right, well, they're not going to do that based simply on a product's performance or a solution's value creation. They're going to want to like who the solution is coming from. They're going to want to appreciate whose hands made the product. And so what the process of brand strategy is it's about the audience that you're trying to engage, whether that's the consumer or the customer, the buyer or the user. Who are they? How do they think? What do they care about? What do their lives look like? And trying to figure out how what you are offering fits in their life and adds value to it in a way that they feel understood. And honestly, for those of us that have been in love, that's kind of the crux of love, is feeling understood, feeling seen. And that's what I mean by that language, is that the process of brand strategy helps people feel seen, and that often makes them feel loved.
That's really powerful. And would you mind if I played a little devil's advocate on this?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. So, because I think right now there's entrepreneurs listening to what you're saying, and they're thinking, why should brand strategy matter to me? I'm a little company. I'm not Google. I don't have a gajillion dollars to spend on some big branding strategy. And anyway, it all sounds like a bunch of corporate bullshit manipulation, right? So like, I just want to sell my product. What would you say to that?
What's interesting about brand strategy is it's bigger and harder for something like a Fortune 100 than it is for an entrepreneur, startup, small business. They actually have the advantage. So I would say, all right, you might not like the concept, but just so you know, small business leader, you have the advantage here. Because one, your audience is within arm's length. Two, you don't have decades of identity that you need to also represent and speak against. You're just talking about what you've just constructed or is a handful of years old. Not to mention that you don't have thousands of products. You use Google as an example.
Right.
How many thousands of products does Google's brand strategy ultimately have to inform and touch? You can imagine that is so hard, so hard. So my first response is, even though people might say brand strategy is for the big players, my argument is, hey, little players, you're lucky, because it's so much easier should you want to do it. Okay, so now let me get down to, all right, for those in disbelief, those who say, come on, my product works, my service works, doesn't that do enough? And my answer is, well, the challenge is that you often are not alone in offering that thing. That product or service does not stand alone. And despite you believing that yours is unique or interesting, your audience is not waiting around pathetically in paralysis, waiting for your thing to show up. They're going about their lives. They're using what used to work, or using what's fine, or jerry-rigging it themselves. And so you need to stop them. You need to intrigue them. You need to get them to choose to no longer use what is sufficient now and make a choice to learn something new.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't come easily. And so I don't care how high quality or how good the price, you are asking people to change their practice. And that requires nurturing, understanding, feeling seen, language that is familiar. And that's why this brand strategy process works so beautifully for a small business. Is I'm not asking you to do anything that costs millions of dollars to do. I'm asking you to reflect and ask this audience you're targeting, what are they using now? Okay, so Dan, as a coach, maybe they're reading books. They're already reading books. So as we're positioning Dan as a coach, all right, well, we have to acknowledge that they think that they have a solution. But the reason why they don't have a solution is because the book is not custom. Dan's coaching serves people with their unique entrepreneurial challenges, right? I'm just trying to figure out so that I can help the audience who's already using something conclude what they are missing, and then make the choice to possibly consider a new.
And I love, Sasha, what you say about making a connection, like making an honest connection with someone so you feel heard. So what's that process like for you? Like when you look at both a company and say, okay, who are the people that they should be relating to? And then also, okay, now how do I get them on board with this whole brand strategy thing? How does that work?
Great question. And the answer is the same. It's all about humans, and it's all about making those humans feel heard and understood. So to parse your question out, you asked me, when I'm dealing with an audience, I'm trying to build a brand for an audience, how do we do it so that it relates to that buyer, user, customer? And then secondarily, how do I do it so that the people inside the organization feel like, wow, this is authentic, this is usable, I can relate to this. So in both situations, the first and most important factor is to assume nothing. Don't say, I know people who work out, I know what they want from a workout, I'm going to tell them why my workout is relevant to them. You may be a great fitness coach, you may be really experienced as someone who works out, but by biasing the brand experience based on who you are or how you see the world really is selfish. It neglects the user, the audience, the customer. And my favorite example of this is I often, when I'm dealing with, like, let's say like a Fortune 50 CEO, and just to simplify this, let's just say that one of the things we're talking about is changing a color in the visual system of the brand. And that CEO will say, well, my favorite color is purple. And, my cold, hard response to them is, I don't care what your favorite color is. Like, don't say that to me ever again, or I'm going to leave. You can hire another brand consultant if you want, but I don't want to hear what you like, because that's inconsiderate. It's selfish. It's self-centered. It's really about your poor audience and their challenges and frustrations where they need a solution, and you might be that solution, but there are a lot of other organizations out there, and it turns out that none of them in all of their communications use the color purple.
Right. And so, doesn't fit.
Okay. It fits the psyche, the choice, the process of the user. So to get to the first answer to your question, knowing thy user, empathizing with thy user, witnessing thy user, social listening to thy user, not social media-ing at marketing to the user. No. Yeah. Independently, objectively, neutrally subscribing to their channels and watching them behave, and then concluding, oh, wow, this is how they talk about subject X. These are the concerns that they're voicing and socializing around. These are the types of topics that they automatically reply to. Oh, okay, now I know what they're challenged by. Good. Now I can help take the assets of my brand, select the ones that appeal to those needs, and build my brand message around that connection. Yeah. There we go. We're building it around who they are, why they matter, what they need, not what I am, what I believe, who I am as the leader. Okay, that's the first answer to your question.
I do want to say something, is that I'm getting in my mind a picture of a date, right? And one person who initiated the date, they're at a restaurant, and one person says, oh my God, the fish here is amazing. I'm going to order the fish for you. Right. And this drink is amazing. I'm going to order that for you. And this, I'm going to order that for you. And then we're going to talk about Star Trek, because Star Trek is awesome. I love, right. And it sounds like if you put it in that context, it's very clear, right, that person would not get a second date, right? Like, how rude and offensive is that? And yet, Sasha, so many entrepreneurs do that with their product or service, right? I know what's best. You don't.
Okay, and to make that person that you just described not a bad person, I want you to know the fish and Star Trek are awesome. And guess what? And the person on the date might like the fish and the Star Trek discussion, right? But they didn't make the choice. It isn't. Maybe they did a Star Trek binge last week, and they're all Star Trek'd out.
Right.
That's the point. That's it. It's not that your recommendations aren't kind and good and interesting, and that this place is a fish restaurant and this is their freshest catch. Not wrong. Simply not considering the audience and whatever circumstances they just got off a fishing trip. They're all fished out. And that's the point, is that that date could go so much better if it was really about you being a good listener. Those are your words, Dan. I hear you say that all the time. You know, it's not about telling, it's about listening. And so that's the point of brand strategy. Brand strategy is not, and that I pop a lot of balloons when I tell really creative people, don't get into brand strategy if you're overtly creative, because it's not about artisanal, distracting. It's really about like research, analysis, conclusion, you know, like that's really that process. So knowing thy audience, caring about how that audience feels, using that audience's language, so you're not having to educate them and teach them new words. That's what makes brand strategy work really well for the receiver. Now, to answer your initial second question,
please, yes,
about the employee, the internal. So as an entrepreneur, you might have 3 people, 7 people, 25 people. And if they don't believe in the brand story, then they're not going to communicate the brand story. I don't care how many brand guidelines you give them. And so what I've learned over all these years is that no matter how good the brand answer, you as the leader of the company, you do all this consumer research. You find out exactly what they care about. You know exactly what competition is doing and what makes your service delivery different. Great. You package it, it's systematized, it's ready to go. And then you turn to your workforce and you say, team, I have such the right answer. The customer has told me that it's right. Check out the feedback that I received. I need you to eat this and I need you to live it. Even if the answer is correct, they will not advocate and represent that work. And there's only one reason, because they weren't considering it. That's it. No. They were not a part of the process. So how do we build brands for organizations large and small that the workforce will live and breathe? We include them in the process. We do internal focus groups. We ask them to identify competition. Hey, sales team, when you're pitching our services, what other organizations do people bring up? Hey, sales team, what type of professional associations do you tend to learn from, read about, watch videos from, conferences do you attend? That way we can consider that industry language, those channels in whatever brand answer we're producing. And that way, when we come back and give them the brand system, they feel heard. Like I said earlier, they feel seen. And that understanding makes them far more likely to use the brand system.
That's really something. I mean, there's a reoccurring theme here that's very clear. Being heard, feeling heard, being seen, being appreciated. You know, these are all
love.
Bottom line, right? There we are again. Very bottom line human needs. And yet, it seems that the entrepreneurial push is often, I know what's better for you than you do. And even, and what I get you saying is like, even if that's true, it's not going to help you.
Like, and this is the thing about entrepreneurs, is the world needs them. We need people with fire in their belly. So I am not trying to douse that flame. No. But your fire, your spirit is, as an entrepreneur, unique and awkward and distracting and a little intimidating, right? And so entrepreneurs with vision who are beyond their fire acknowledge that everyone can't see that flame. Everyone can't appreciate its color. And it's your job to put your flame in the context of the warmth that your audience is seeking. And so I don't want any entrepreneur listening to us today to think that we're trying to get them to quiet their flame. We're just trying to get them to repackage it slightly, clip off a piece of it so that it doesn't burn so bright that it's distracting, and package it in a way that an audience can appreciate it and use its light. So that's the challenge with entrepreneurship. It's why I spend so much time with entrepreneurs, is I try to get them to slow down a little bit, manage your enthusiasm, because you need it. It will propel you forever, but acknowledge that entrepreneurs are not everywhere. Entrepreneurs are knowable and nameable. Why? Because there's so few of us. And therefore, your entrepreneur energy cannot be your brand's energy. It cannot be your organization's energy. It cannot be that organization's identity.
Is that because it would be overwhelming?
Yeah, okay, so let's take a dancer. And I don't need to guess here. I'm not a dancer. I don't know how good of a dancer you are, but let's just say that there's someone who is. Let's equate entrepreneurial energy and dancer energy. Okay.
Hmm.
And you could imagine that that dancer, when on stage or when, performing, everyone is like, whoa, that is amazing. That's awesome. But when you go out for coffee with that dancer and they're like, busting the moves while they're in line with you at the coffee shop, you're like, whoa, there's a time and place for that
Right,
energy,
right,
right?
yeah. That's
And
funny.
so what I'm trying to get to is that entrepreneurial energy has a place on stage. It has a place with investors,
Yeah,
but does it show up in a round one pitch meeting with a client? Like,
right.
oof, that could really be awkward. Or you're out to dinner with the client. Ooh, that could be really awkward.
Mm.
So that's the point. And that's where, and it's so hard for entrepreneurs to hear, but they often don't see themselves.
Mm.
They can't
Nice.
kind of get out of their, like third person view here and be like, oh, wow, my blood vessels are popping from my head. My eyes are bulging. I'm throwing my hands up and this poor person is just trying to figure out what widget to buy.
Yeah.
And so that's what brand also helps them do, is we often say that branding helps hold up a mirror to the leader
Yeah.
and let them see themselves for the first time.
This is amazing. And it's fascinating to me that you're here and you're doing this. And that's because I've learned a little bit about you. And I want to go back in time a little bit and talk about a bit of your origin. Now, I know your dad was a surgeon, right?
Yeah, still is. Yeah, orthopedic surgeon. Yeah.
And he'd get emergency calls in the middle of the night. But
Right.
rather than leave you and your mom at home, you would go to the hospital with him, right?
That's right. Yeah, it was, this is all one before like cell phones and stuff.
Yeah. Oh,
And two,
and how old were you?
until I was in college, really. I mean,
Wow.
as long as I lived at home with my parents, my brother and I knew this. Let me just say that
Yeah.
anyone who worked in my father's hospital, I knew. I knew the police officers, I knew the janitorial staff. We were friends because I had spent, the perfect example is that the school bus in middle school did not take me home. The school bus took me to the hospital. That's how much time we spent there. And we never once thought it was weird. We never once were annoyed by it. Yeah.
I want to know, how do you think those unusual experiences shaped you?
Well, yes, you're gonna get me all emotional here. Growing up, watching people love to work hard and throw out no animosity. When the phone would ring at 3 a.m. and my mom or my dad would answer the phone, there was no like, what what happened to somebody? Oh, what an idiot! All right, I'm coming in. The phone was answered with, hi, yes, Dr. Strauss here. Or, my mom would answer and be like, oh, let me get Dr. Strauss for you. And then when we would kind of get woken up to go into the hospital, it was like, kids, okay, daddy's going to go in for surgery, or mom's going to go in and fill up medicine, pharmaceuticals for patients. And we're like, okay, like we would just kind of get toys together or whatever, or a pillow. And we would go and we would sleep in the car, and then we would sleep under the desk, or maybe would help in the surgery room or whatever it was. And I think because we were proud of the work as a family, just felt honored to get to do the work, but also that my parents sort of saw this as like maybe setting an example that, as children of immigrants, that you getting to work in the United States, being able to choose your career, helping people with your career, like what a blessing to spend your intellectual years in a business, in a service that basically is in the business of helping other people.
I didn't see the connection between like this really cool giving doctor and this guy working with corporate giants like Google and Disney, but it really does come back to compassion.
Yes, I think you're making the right connection. When my father does surgeries, my father's sort of an interesting anomaly. A lot of orthopedic surgeons are some of the wealthiest doctors in the world. Those are not my parents. That's not how my father does medicine. My father specifically serves some of the lowest income patients. We're talking about severe diabetics with problem wounds that won't heal, that insurance no longer will pay for. And like you're pointing out, that is my father's compassion, but it is also his art. That's what's incredible. And when growing up in medicine, you learn that no single patient is the same. No single wound is the same. And I feel the exact same way about brand. No single organization, no single challenge is the same. And I get the gift to get to learn about it, create a solution, craft it, and use my unique capabilities to produce an answer that works for the life of the organization, or in my father's context, works for the life of the individual. And I do feel that, I'm not saving lives for a living like my father is, but I absolutely am motivating people to believe in who they work for. I absolutely am helping audiences and customers find solutions they can believe in. And it's nowhere near as divine as what my parents have done, but it does absolutely make me feel like I have purpose.
I think that a lot of people would look at you and listen to you and think, well, Sasha just has some kind of success gene that just made this easy for him. This path of, from childhood to here, but that definitely wasn't you, right?
No
I
success
know that
gene, nothing, no.
right? In
absolutely.
what
failure gene? Is there a failure gene? Because that would be the gene that I have.
You could have easily ended up accepting their brand of you as this dumb kid and just sort of given up in life. And why do you think that didn't happen?
I really don't know. I never believed them. I definitely remember how low I got. I definitely remember moments where my father had to say things to me like, no matter how you feel today, the sun is going to come up tomorrow and you're going to have a whole new chance to see all of this differently. And my father is not like a wisdom-toting philosopher, He just saw me sulking and feeling wounded by all the judgment and said the right thing at the right time at the right place. And I marked it in my brain forever. Let me see if I can try and answer. It's a really hard question, Dan. And I guess that's your job as a coach, is to push people. I'm a sensitive person. And when someone else, the perfect example is the number one shows on television are crime documentaries, CSI and things like that. I cannot watch them. I'm constantly suffering for those that are being hurt or traumatized or wounded or whatever it might be. And so I can't watch those shows. And so part of me growing up was suffering, but also feeling the suffering of others. And so as I was growing up and trying to find my way and suffering, I think I felt other people's suffering more than I felt my own, just because of my sensitivities. And it's part of my ADD is both a gift and a curse. And it's part of what makes me good at branding, by the way, is that, I may want products A, B, and C, but wow, once I start learning about that audience over there, I'm like feeling into their feelings and I'm imagining their lives, and it helps me construct a brand answer that feels relevant to them. But to get to your question about what pushed me through, I felt manipulated a lot. So this is just sort of to get you to the same place where I am in my mind. When you talk to me about my father being a doctor, likely as I grew up in hospitals with him, I would want to be a doctor. And the answer is exactly. I did. I did. But when you're told that by your teachers and administrators that you're a failure, you're stupid, go sit outside the class, you're ruining class for all the other students. And I want to be clear, I never lied or cheated or stole or cursed or fought. I never raised my fist to anyone in my life. So it wasn't like I was a bad kid. It's just the school system in North America in 1980 wasn't built for people whose minds worked differently. They were built for people whose minds that worked the same. So while I was sort of sulking in that pain and frustration, I was being manipulated. I would watch a television show and I would believe what was being sold to me. I'd watch a commercial and I would want that car. I would go to mosque or prayer hall or church or synagogue or shul with a friend, and whatever the cleric was saying, I'd be like, oh my God, that is the deity. She is the queen, and and that was fine. I was young enough where it didn't affect my life too much, other than I believed. I was born a believer. But when I got to college, when I was let in as a special ed student at the college, it was clear that I wasn't going to make it as a doctor. And I read some articles about people that worked in the communications world, public relations, marketing, and branding. And I had one of those epiphany aha moments where I was like, oh my gosh, the reason why I'm so impacted by these commercials, the reason why I'm so impacted by these religious leaders is because they know what they're doing. They know what they're saying. That commercial was written to manipulate me. And so my first foray into the branding business was an act of self-protection, meaning I wanted to know how I was being manipulated. So I went into the business to understand how the manipulation worked.
And I think a lot of entrepreneurs choose the thing that they do based on some kind of wound, right? Based on some kind of emptiness that they're trying to resolve. And for you, Sasha, I think that at some point you became an expert at separating out other people's judgments of you and defining who you are for yourself, like your brand. This is really important for entrepreneurs to hear, because in this day and age, I hear way too many people complain about that they're not supported, their teachers or their parents or their partners. And here you are literally thrown out of class, humiliated. And somewhere inside of you, you were still able to get to, hey, I think I'm a pretty great guy, right? I work really hard at getting entrepreneurs away from the idea that there's something else outside of them that's preventing them from their success, that it's all an inside job. It is crystal clear that you had everything working against you in your success, and yet here you are.
You're spot on. And that's the hardest thing for an entrepreneur to recognize, is that their will, their drive, that fire comes from trauma. And if you can know the trauma and not have animosity for it, not be angry about it, but recognize that it is in fact a blessing to you and your future, then you can use it as rocket fuel.
Yes.
And, I think maybe I'll tell a story. I don't think I've ever shared this with anybody, but one of the bullies that beat me up every day in 8th grade, I felt like a target every single day in PE. I knew that this person was going to just beat on me. And for whatever reason, there were maybe too many kids in the class. The teacher just never seemed to do anything about it. And so school wrapped up at the end of the year in 8th grade. And this bully, out of the blue, gets jumped by a bunch of other kids and they start beating him up. And I thought to myself, am I happy or sad that he's getting beat up? And I realized in the moment that I felt really bad for him. And that is not a choice I made. That is actually how I felt. And so that unbridled empathy, that like it or like the person or not, that I don't want them to suffer. Or maybe this bully is bullied by other people and I just happen to be in the line. Anyway, I know we're tangenting, but I think you and I are both trying to focus on the same thing.
Well,
fire inside.
but to bring it back to like the audience, this is so important because it's raw empathy, right? And this is something I try to package this in 100,000 different ways to help entrepreneurs be more successful. And it really is about empathy. Right? It is separating oneself from the love of what they're selling or offering and being empathetic for what they're struggling with. There's a guy in my business group who's in the fire extinguisher company, and I sat him, and he's really struggling. And I sat him and I said, okay, what's the most important thing to your clients? And he said, well, that their business doesn't burn down. I'm like, no, that's what's important to you. What's important to them? And he thought for a moment and he says, I don't know. I go, that's the problem.
Right. And I immediately go to like, as you're saying, I can't even help myself. I'm immediately imagining the person who's buying fire extinguishers and the fear they live with every day that their business is going to burn down.
Right.
And that the fire extinguisher is really about being able to sleep at night. It's really about peace of mind and comfort and a sense of control. Like something about that emotional fear of owning and operating a business that could be gone tomorrow. I'm actually quite modest when I go back to like alumni events and stuff. And I think being a graduate school professor at USC, UC Irvine, and UCLA, 3 schools that didn't let me in, rejected my applications over and over and over again. That's all I need.
But you somehow got 7 different CEOs to write letters to the administration, essentially saying, put this kid in your school. He's amazing. Like, how did you inspire that?
Who in my life did you call and get this private information from?
Sir? I have operatives everywhere, Sasha.
So I was going to say,
answer the question.
Wow. To answer your question, after being rejected by so many situations, I ran for a student body office in high school and just got literally rejected because I was a nerd, like a dork. The panel of the decision makers were like, we're afraid that if you're on the board of the student group, that people won't join the student group, that kind of stuff. After being rejected, I was like, all right, the application process it's finite. There are like sections. And so I was going through the sections of the college and graduate school applications. And I was like, all right, which sections can I win and which sections can I not win? So I knew the grade section, there will be no championship ring for Sasha over here in the grade section.
Right.
But in the essay section, I was like, all right, I'm an emotional person. I could write something that's compelling. I'll work hard on that. And then there was a section about career experience. And so as I kept getting rejected, I was like, well, damn me, I'm going to go get career experience. And because I was willing, I always have been willing to work hard. Mm-hmm. Being incapable, second issue. But being willing was one thing. And so I don't care if I was doing car washes. I don't care if I was valeting at the local Italian restaurant, whatever. They never met someone who wanted to work as hard as I did, putting in the hours and getting paid very little to do it. So when a CEO bears witness to someone who wants to work that hard, they become an advocate. It doesn't matter how low ranked I am in that organization. So by the time I graduated from college, and those 7 companies that had employed me were like, no one has ever brought that much will, that much commitment. I was famous for finishing a project and then going around to executive offices and being like, hey, hi, I'm just a account coordinator over here, but I finished my project for the day. Is there something you want help with? And they're like, who's this kid? And actually, I've got this pitch tomorrow. Can you do some research or whatever? And so anyway, by being so focused and willing, I earned their favor. These were no connections I had. There was no family referred me or I knew someone. I never met anybody who worked in my field before. So everything I had to create on my own, And so by doing hard work and showing up committed, and it's classic, show up early, show up ready, dress the part, know your shit, I never showed up to a meeting unprepared. And that's right out of Boy Scouts, whole premise,
right,
be prepared,
Right, yeah.
Yes, totally. All that stuff. So that was how I did it. And by the time I had those 7 letters of recommendation, I remember the Office of Student Admissions basically calling one of the references. I'd be like, hey, so we're thinking about letting this kid in. Is this real? Is this real? And fortunately I knew all these CEOs. And so he called me afterwards and he was like, Sasha, guess what? I just got a call from XYZ school. And they were like, is what you wrote in this letter true? And I told him every damn word. So I hope you get in.
That's amazing.
All right. Yeah.
And this is a great example of also definitely ADD is your superpower, man. It's beautiful that you were able to turn something that you were shamed for and struggled with and really turn it into something that people admired you for.
And so that's kind of the journey for us as entrepreneurs, is to lean into that trauma, not be angry about it, not go back and spite who traumatized us, but recognize that it helped us see what others can't see, and own that and use that to drive your contribution.
That's perfectly said. Okay. I want to talk about the inception and success of your company Innovation Protocol.
Okay.
How did this begin?
Well, like we were talking about, those 7 CEOs that wrote me letters of recommendation, they all were in the world of marketing, public relations, advertising, branding. So I wasn't in irrelevant careers. I was in semi-related jobs. So they added value to one another. I was always in sort of the communications arena.
Right.
And then after college, because while I was in college, I started some of the largest clubs on campus. I did all of these marketing communications roles for nonprofits. By the time I graduated, despite my grades, I was a viable employee candidate. So I went to go work for agencies, firms, branding agencies, advertising agencies, et cetera. And after about my fourth or fifth one, I had a sort of a paralyzed moment where I was like, I don't know if I can go on doing this. And my spouse at the time said, what is your issue? What is it? Why is it that you know that this is what you are destined to do, but why can't you do it at these organizations? And what we concluded as a team was because of the immorality, the unethical behavior of the businesses that I was employed by. Now, I'll start right now and say, by anyone else's measure, they were not that unethical. But I, being as sensitive as we described and too empathetic to a fault, I didn't like their behavior. I'll give you one example that no one will find to be that distracting, but I couldn't live with it. In the communications world, when you're putting on events or writing a publication or whatever it might be, you often hire contractors, a photographer, a copywriter, a web producer. Okay. Right. So you have a client, you sell them a pile of work, they pay you, you bring on these parties, they do the work, and then you pay them. Okay. Well, in the classic agency world, you take in the income, but you pay it out as far down the line as possible. So you might pay it out 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line. Well, I just thought that was so mean, so manipulative. Now, granted, the contractors expected it. It was par for the category. The agencies shrug. This is how everyone does this.
Yeah.
And so to get to your question about the inception of innovation protocol, what my first spouse and I discussed was, is it possible to do this work without ethical compromise, with never lying on our taxes, with never manipulating contractors, with building contracts with clients that are pure, authentic, clear, easy to interpret, no vague terms, no generalities? Is it possible to employ people and not be angry with them when they leave or crush their careers and say to them things like, you'll never work in this town again when they leave you? And so I set up basically 10 parameters, one being that we will always do nonprofit work. I've been threatened to be fired many times in my career, but probably one of the most consistent threats was, if you keep doing that nonprofit work, I'm going to fire you. And so part of my choice was, all right, if I'm going to do this brand strategy work, there will be nonprofits on the roster all the time. So that was the inception of the independent consultant, Sasha Strauss, doing business that he called Innovation Protocol, just to give it a name. I never wanted employees. I never imagined it would be a firm. But it turned out that the more I did the work, the more I found people who wanted the same go to sleep at night comfort of having no ethical compromise.
And it sounds to me a lot like your dad. It sounds to me like the surgeon who's doing those low-income surgeries because it's the right thing to do, not because everybody else isn't doing them or because it's the money. It's just the right thing to do. And it seems like that flows through everything that you've done, Sasha. And I'm wondering, did you set your sights on these companies, or are you still a little wowed by the fact that that they come to you for branding?
Humbled, wowed, honored. Yeah, no, I've never said a single negative word about a competitor. And so they started like setting up cameras and bringing in their producers and started filming us. And what they did is they took every one of my employees in a room privately and started interviewing them. And they started asking them questions like, who are you guys trying to beat? One of your competitors is named X. Tell me what's wrong with the way that they do their work. And my employees, one after the other was like, we've got no beef. Like, there's plenty of work to go around. And so, yeah, by carrying ourselves this way, again, we can go to sleep at night without having any guilt or remorse. But also, you can feel really good about your work, knowing that others aren't suffering because you're succeeding.
Yeah.
And that to me is the most important thing, is that I don't want my success to be at the compromise of someone else's, something that can be witnessed and learned from and applied. And it's probably the reason why I teach so much is I'm like, oh my God, this job is amazing. Everyone should do it. Let me teach you how to do what I do, because I feel lucky to be fulfilled and I want others to feel the same.
We talked about clients saying, hey, you got to drop some of these non-profits, right? You get pushback.
My employers saying
your
you have to drop it.
employers. Okay.
Correct.
Wow.
My people that were paying me to do brands, a hardworking, as I described, employee inside of these agencies, running these big accounts. But what do you know? At like 4:00 on a Thursday, I had to go to a nonprofit board meeting, and they were just livid about it.
Wow. And like, and it's clear. I mean, nonprofits are a big part of what you do. I think there was like 50 of them that you've worked with or more.
Absolutely, no question. Major part of how we run our business.
And I'm also guessing that your meteoric rise of innovation protocol, you've never made mistakes, never had any failures. It's always been super simple, right, Sasha?
You mean this in the last 10 minutes? You're right. There haven't been any failures.
But honestly, though, can you share some of the challenges that you faced when you made mistakes and how you were able to recover from them?
The list is so long. It touches on how I employed people, what I believed about projects and value for time, infinite. I will quickly fast forward the tape and tell you how I have learned to solve for those persistent, consistent, always present challenges. And the answer is I have a peer group. I have a group of other CEOs that I meet with every month for 8 hours, and their problems are my problems are their problems, and we learn through those struggles together. So everything from financial challenges to legal challenges to doing a whole bunch of work and not getting paid for it, hundreds of thousands of dollars of work, and then the client being like, you know what, we're not going to pay you for it. All that stuff, absolutely. But having a peer group to process that with has helped me succeed and thrive despite those inevitable challenges.
But how do you recover? Like when you make mistakes or just bad people show up and bad things happen and it drains you. It's a shot to the heart. How do you come back from that?
Well, to bring this full circle, I hear my dad's words saying to me while I was, suffering as a youth, that today may feel insurmountable, but the sun is going to come up tomorrow and you're going to get a whole new chance to win. Wow. And that's it. I go to bed on the worst of days saying to myself, the way that I feel is now, but it will not be how I feel tomorrow. And tomorrow I get new chances to define what winning feels like to me. And that's it. I turn to my friends, I watch favorite movies, do anything I need to do to distract my mind and get through that suffering. But then I look at the next day as lucky.
That's beautiful. And I want to wrap this up by engaging your big branding brain. I want to know, what do you see are the biggest mistakes entrepreneurs and small companies make when it comes to branding themselves?
Well, one, they brand the business based on who they are. Two, they think that they, quote, know everything, and they refuse to listen to their competition, subscribe to their competition's newsletters, watch their competition's YouTube channels, just sort of gross neglect. And then the third thing that they tend to do is that once they make a decision, they stick by it forever. And those are my three regular pieces of feedback for entrepreneurs. Is entrepreneurs are so overly proud of their choices that they often will nurture a bad choice simply because they made it.
Wow, that's terrific. And how do you help people overcome that? Like, okay, if this is the mistake, what's the solution?
So it really is what I do specifically with entrepreneurs is that I hear them, I show them that I understand what I heard, and then I hold up a mirror and I share it back at them and help them see that what they are really doing is that they are masturbating, So they are absolutely pleasing themselves.
Right.
And that's the hard learning for entrepreneurs, is that if you are doing something that pleases you, and I don't mean that your work shouldn't please you, I'm just saying that if the idea, the message, the outcome, the event, the production is just making you smile ear to ear,
yeah,
you're likely pleasing yourself.
And so on that, what is something that every entrepreneur must do in order to be successful that you see a lot of entrepreneurs not doing?
Collecting feedback using third parties. What entrepreneurs tend to do is they go to an individual, a client, family member, employee, and they ask the person directly, what do you think about my product? What do you think about this solution? What do you think about this copy? And the problem is that those people are, one, too close to you, and two, they are not going to say to your face what you need to hear. And so that's the role of consulting in general, is third-party power, like a therapist, third-party power. And so a coach, whoever it might need to be, that third party can play the listener and the asker in a way that you as the entrepreneur can't. And that's my counsel.
What is next for Sasha Strauss and Innovation Protocol?
We got a lot of really cool things going on, and the impending economic, turmoil is something that is top of mind for us. And not only top of mind for us, but we are really trying hard to figure out what would be the long game. Like, not that this recession is going to last 6 months, but imagining that this recession is going to last 3 years and making calculated decisions about what we're doing. Yeah. So one thing that we're doing is that we're looking at all of our client programs and thinking about their long-term needs and helping them build a plan for the recession. This impending economic challenge, the fuel shortage, and how that's impacting farming. I mean, there's like all this trickle-down impact.
Yeah.
So we're asking, how are our clients going to be impacted? And therefore, how can we help them plan? That's sort of one thing that we're doing. The second thing that we're doing is that we're thinking about our employees. And it's known that when someone is terminated during a recession, it impacts their career forever. Someone who's been terminated during a recession consistently has a harder time securing new jobs even after the recession is over. It's like a scarlet letter. So another thing we're doing is we're intentionally figuring out how to ensure that our workforce is not compromised by the recession. So for example, we're scoping out our projects in a way that can account for their time. We're not overhiring despite, being very busy. We're thinking about additional services and products so that those folks can stay employed and busy even in a downturn. And then we've been asked to give a lot of speeches. We really did it for funsies. We took a lot of stages. We did a lot of really cool stuff. And I mean, the 50 companies and, 500 organizations and 20 countries, it's just been unbelievable. But the pathetic truth is we didn't direct, organize, or plan any of it. It all just happened. My company did not have a plan for me to be on this podcast with you and have this great conversation. So, admittingly, we've grossly neglected the power of our voice. And one thing we know for certain going forward is that we're going to be strategic and intentional about how we speak, where we speak, how we partner, what podcasts we pursue, and how we use those to sort of tell the story of who we are and why we matter.
I'm really glad I got in under the wire here. Also, I appreciate you being so forthcoming and honest about, wow, hey, we made a mistake. And, part of your brand is your transparency. Like, it's very clear that when I'm talking to Sasha Strauss, I'm not talking to your representative, I'm talking to you. And so many people put up a persona because they think this is how to sell, this is how to connect. And it actually does the opposite.
Right. Sorry, I just want to catch you right here because there's a concept in artificial intelligence and robotics called the uncanny valley. Have you heard about this?
No, tell me.
It's so interesting. So if we make a robot that looks like a human and behaves like a human, humans have a really interesting response to it where they get creeped out And it's a scientifically studied issue, and it's called the uncanny valley, which describes the space between human and humanoid robot, where the human can detect that this is not real. So it's my strange analogy for salespeople who pretend to be something that they're not. Is it triggers this visceral, organic human response, the uncanny valley, where it feels uncanny to me as an audience, like, ooh, this person just doesn't feel right, doesn't feel real to me. And that doubt compromises my will to purchase.
Wow, well said. And because I want to be respectful of your time, you give me a lot. Finally, how can people connect with you? Like, you're blowing us away for all this time about what you do. How can they get in touch with you?
I think LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to come to me directly. And then if you want to connect with my coworkers and my company, innovationprotocol.com is the best choice there.
Sasha, thank you for being so generous with your time. So thank you for being on for Badass Entrepreneurs Only.
Glad to do it for you. Appreciate all the kind questions and the deep research. And I have a lot of people in my life to get after and figure out how you spliff them to give you all my secrets, man.
Hey, one last thing. If you're feeling stuck in business life, wherever, download my book, Jumping the Gap, Kill Your Story and Take Action. In this book, you'll see how the stories that you tell yourself are stopping yourself from living your greatest life. Just text the word GAP, G-A-P, to this number, 213-409-8313, 409-8366. You'll love it. All right, that's it. Go out there and be badass today.